question, do you think it's a good idea to floss or not? I know this video is probably going to cause a bit of controversy, but I don't often floss. I do brush my teeth regularly, obviously, most of us do. I don't floss very often, and I decided to floss this morning, and it feels like all my gums are just inflamed, and it's really quite unpleasant. And it just makes me wonder, like, is it actually worth doing or not? Like, I don't think my teeth are that bad. I may not be like Hollywood white, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not convinced that flossing is a particularly good idea. I know there's like all this science that says you should do it, but I'm not convinced right now because my gums ache. So anyway, the topic of this video, I mean, I guess the flossing thing is relevant because this is actually a topic that is kind of, it's something that is like percolating in my brain, and I think is like super important. And that's because I feel like if we look at how long humans have been on this planet as a whole, I don't know the exact figures, but let's just say 100,000 years. Humans have been on this planet as we are now, as these bipedal, 2 legs, 2 arms creatures. And when we go back to those times, we lived as a tribal species, and I've mentioned this a few times because it's very important, I think, in a social sense, and explains a lot about the social anxieties that so many people are experiencing now. But let's look back to those times, because we existed like that for thousands and thousands of years without any great change in the technology we were using. We were hunter-gatherers. So this is long before we learned to farm. We would live in these small, close-knit tribes, and we would go out and we would hunt. And whether you agree with it or not, typically the woman or the women would stay home and look after the kids, although that may not be true in all tribes, but that's, as far as I understand it, may be the case. And the men went out and hunted and brought back the animals and the whatever else they managed to find when they were out in the wilds. And when you look back on those times, there's a lot of stuff that they didn't do that we did. And yeah, you could argue that we have a much better quality of life in terms of life expectancy and in terms of medical advances, all of those types of things. But they also didn't need them because there wasn't as much disease. There wasn't as many problems in their world as there is today. And it just makes me wonder that if we live in such a technologically advanced world with access to so much information, we're more connected than we've ever been. We understand more about the human brain, the human body than we ever have done. We understand more about the universe and how it works than we ever have done. And yet we all feel disconnected. We all feel unhappy to a certain extent. A lot of us feel depressed. A lot of us feel anxious. A lot of people are suffering from health conditions. A lot of people are not enjoying their experience on this life, on this earth. And is that really how life's supposed to be? I'm not really convinced. And it makes me think, have we gone the wrong direction? Do we need to go back to a more historical type of living? Do we need more communal type living? Like, the lockdown, I think, had a massive effect on so many of us because we were isolated, and we as humans are not designed to be isolated. Like, sure, the idea of living in a tribe with hundreds of other people may not feel like your cup of tea, but I guarantee your biology says differently. And also, just because you lived in a tribe with 100 different people doesn't mean you have to interact with all of them. The point was that you feel this base level of safety knowing that they're there, and you're there to help them and they're there to help you. And humans are all different as well. That's what makes us so interesting, is that, like, I've noticed this, I noticed this when my nieces were born. They were born about 2 years apart, and they got the same mum, the same dad, they've grown up in the same environment, and yet they are totally different people. One's like a real girly girl, she's into her makeup and all that kind of stuff, and then the other one is like a real tomboy, into her football and stuff. And they've had the exact same experiences in this life. And I think, again, this is like a biological trait. I think it's supposed to happen. I think baked into our DNA are these differences, and these differences complement each other. So when you lived in a tribe, you may not be the fastest, best hunter, but you may be the best at foraging, for instance. And so when it comes to gathering food for the tribe, both of you are strong in one particular area and weak in the other, but together you create a really strong force that can gather meat and all the animal products that humans need to survive, as well as all of the berries and the vegetables and the nutrients and the vitamins that you need to survive as well. And I think this is baked into our DNA. I think we're getting further and further away from this truth, this absolute truth, because for me, like, it's something that I really struggle to articulate. It's something that I actually really struggle to put into words, but it is something that I feel. It almost feels, it's going to sound crazy, it almost feels a bit like the Matrix, in the sense that we are more and more becoming these like fleshy lumps that are in pods, being dosed and medicated with shit food that makes us feel bad, and then being given entertainment, cheap entertainment, to make us feel better about the fact that we feel bad. So look at Netflix and video games and our phones, like all of those things like tranquilize us. And actually, if we took a step back and we stepped away from the screens, if we were forced into a position, let's just say where you took 100 random people off the earth and you dumped them all on an island and they all just had to work it out, I think you would really start to realize just how far off feeling normal you actually feel. Like, this has happened to me a few times. The most notable time was when I went traveling to India and I did a meditation retreat. It's a company called, or it's a type of meditation called Vipassana, and if you've never done it, then it's not something I would suggest jumping straight into, because it's a really intense type of meditation. You are meditating for a majority of the day, from like 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the evening. There's no creature comforts, you're not allowed music, you're not allowed to read, you're not allowed to talk. Like, it's intense. But when I suddenly had all of these creature comforts and these tranquilizers ripped away from me, all I had was time to think about my life and about what was going on. And I realized that I really wasn't in a place that I wanted to be. And it was unfortunate, because I had all these big plans when I came back from India, and that was right in the midst of COVID. And yeah, I could have made a lot more changes than I did, but I really struggled, as most of us did, in the lockdown, and my plans went to shit. But I realised, the point is, I had that space, and I realised that once I'd taken away all of those creature comforts that we have, mostly in the Western world, we realised that we have strayed very far from the human beings we were supposed to be. And there was another point I was going to make, and I totally forgot. That was it. So we lived on the plains for thousands of years as these tribal species with no technology, and the technology that is in our lives has only been around for the last 100, 150 years. I mean, if we're looking at the internet, that's only been around for the last 30 or 40 years. And our brains are simply not designed to deal with the amount of information, the amount of stimulation that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. And I think it does make us feel far more stressed and anxious than we really need to feel. And I feel like, there's these ideas that are percolating in my head. I've got no idea what I'm going to do with them, but as always, I just share my thoughts as they come, and I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on this. But I feel like we've strayed as a human species. I feel like deep down we all want to connect with each other. Deep down we all want to provide for each other. We all want to be fulfilled and happy with life, and I feel like the society that we live in these days makes that very difficult. You know, we're encouraged almost to create much smaller groups, like whether you are on your own or maybe you have a spouse and you settle down and create your own little family group. We are isolated from one another. We eat shit food, which causes all sorts of medical conditions, and then we're dosed up with medication to help deal with those problems. It just doesn't feel right to me. And these suicidal people are just going to cross the road. Okay. Yeah, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like something has gone wrong, and it feels like sometimes I just want to move to the middle of nowhere with like a commune of people that want a similar thing and just live a more simple life where you're connected to the earth. And I don't know, maybe there's an inner hippie in me and I'm becoming that hippie all of a sudden. But there's also like some real creature comforts that I like about being in the Western world. You know, I like the fact that I can jump on a plane and travel to another country and experience a whole different culture. I like the fact that I can meet up with my buddy online and we can play some video games together. Like, I like really getting into a film and getting into the characters and feeling those emotions and getting lost in a story. Like, there are some great things that come with these creature comforts. But I guess the question is the cost worth the price? I'm not sure that's the right phrase, but I think these things are more expensive than we realise. And I'm not talking about a cost. When I talk about expense, I'm talking about exchanging one thing for another. And what do you give up in exchange for having these comforts in your life? I guess that's the question I'm asking. So let me know in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. Like, do you believe that we've strayed? Do you actually think that we live in the best times we've ever lived in, and I should maybe be more grateful for the world that we live in? I don't know. It's a tough question, but I think it's one we need to ask more often, because you look at the statistics and we are more depressed, we're more lonely, we're more ill than we have ever been as a species, and we're also more disconnected than we've ever been as a species. We have more access to shit processed foods as a species. Like, I see a correlation between the exposure to things in our life that are unnatural from the perspective of a hunter-gatherer and the prevalence of feeling like shit. And I think that's something we really need to understand as a species. It's something that we need to pick apart, because we can't just keep our heads in the sands. We have to take our head out and look around and question the lives that we live in and the world that we live in, and ask if it's really right for us. And if it's not right for us, we need to ask what we can do about it. Didn't realise this was something that I was this passionate about, but actually, of all the videos I've made in the last week or so, this has actually been the easiest one to talk about, because these topics feel like they are closest to my heart, because I see so much suffering in the world. I see so many people suffering needlessly, and I want to figure out what we can do about it, because I think we have a habit as a species of overcomplicating things, and more often than not, the real solutions, the things that make the biggest difference in our lives, are often the simplest answers too. We don't need to spend more time in isolation. We don't need to spend more time on Netflix or on our Xboxes. Maybe in a lot of instances we need less of what we already have, not more of it. As always, thanks for watching this video, and I'm especially interested to get your thoughts in the comments on this one. I see that there is a lot of movement towards things that are more authentic and more genuine, and I'm noticing that a lot in my videos and generally just on YouTube and social media as a whole. There's a movement away from this heavily processed stuff, and maybe that is a reflection that people want more honesty and authenticity in their lives, and they want more of it from themselves as well. Thanks for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next video.